Hi,
Hey
Robert.
there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm
Yeah,
Robert Winters,
Judy Nathans.
and today is March 2nd,
Right.
2021. We are, what do they say, a month of March, in like a lion, out like a lamb.
Oh boy.
And
Yeah.
it came definitely with the wind
That's
last
true.
night.
Yesterday. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, my daughter recorded something from her bedroom and she said it's because they took down those trees. It's true. Next door that the banshees are coming in. And it was
No, I mean,
true. Yeah.
honestly, I had little real fear of like things come
Yeah.
smashing through a window or something like that. So.
By the way, I should say they took those trees down right before the ordinance, which in that sense, I wish the ordinance had been in effect. But anyway,
Right. Well, that's a pending matter right now.
I
We'll
know.
we'll see.
I
I
know.
mean, hope springs eternal. I think tree protection is a great thing. However, I just want to make sure our elected officials
Yeah.
are aware that
Yeah.
homeowners have to actually manage their properties and
Right.
make
And if
reasonable
they think something
decisions.
is, going to affect their whatevers, they should have a right to do that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and reasonable
without
people
paying a
should,
lot of money to
yeah,
have someone tell them that they can do that
right.
or not.
Give reasonable latitude to reasonable people, and let's all be reasonable. What a concept, really.
Yeah.
So anyway, in the before we dive into good old Cambridge, it is Cambridge Inside Out. On the
All right. Yeah.
out side is Somerville, and
Yeah. Big
kind of a
announcement.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a big announcement. It
Yeah.
was of Somerville Mayor Joe Curtatone, who's been, I think he's now in his ninth term, I
Ninth
think.
term, because 2003, he was elected, started serving in '04. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And and Somerville is becoming similar to Cambridge in certain ways,
Mhm.
demographically
Oh,
and
yeah.
otherwise. I think the economics is
Can't
driving
say
that.
Slumberville anymore.
Can't really do it.
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
Well, we could.
No.
I'm still reminded of Sal Baglio of a band called the Stompers, who he was playing a show in Cambridge. I forget what club it was, and he announced he was a pretty bigger than life guy, and
Yeah.
he said, "Welcome to Cambridge, gateway to Somerville."
Oh,
And I thought, okay, so
yeah.
he was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're still playing all these
Yeah.
years later, by the way. Anyway, so Joe Curtatone, after nine terms, announced in his kind of essentially a state of the city address
Yeah,
that,
quite a long one if you go to the
yeah,
Facebook
long
link
way.
that you provided. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he basically said, "I'm not going to be seeking reelection to mayor of Somerville," and it's Cambridge has its own kind of get down in the mud type of politics. Somerville has a bit of a history of
Mm-hmm.
some knockdown drag out politics, and I don't know
Uh-huh.
what the 2021 version of that's going to be. I think the kind of in the old days, it could be sort of, an Italian guy, towny, like Mike Capuano or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, or I mean, who was before Curtin? Was it
I don't
Dorothy
know.
Kelly Gay? There was Mike
No, it
Capuano.
wasn't Mike Capiano, the one right before.
No, I
No,
think
no,
it might
no,
have been
no. You're right.
it might have been Dorothy Kelly Gay,
I
and
don't know.
but there may have been somebody else in there, I forget. But the thing is, it historically was sort of kind of power politics for that position. But when you have a long-term incumbent like Joe Curtatone, the competition tends to be sort of more of a formality. So this should
Mm,
be a real battle, and I don't know what'll happen, whether you'll get a longtime townie person and it'll be them versus sort of an our
yeah.
revolution type of candidate, because there seems to be a pretty strong presence of that
Well,
demographic.
on their council or whatever they call it, the aldermen or alder count.
Yeah,
I don't know what they're called. Oh,
yeah, and
no, they're called council people now. I don't know what they're called.
yeah, but for a citywide election, it's not so clear to me
Mm-hmm.
what the kind of average demographic is. I mean, the revolution type folks, they kind of won a lot of district seats, kind of caught a few people napping, and then they became
Mm,
the incumbents. And I
yeah.
don't really know how to read Somerville, but I think it'll be an interesting battle. And I think there are already rumors of various characters
Well, the guy
who are
that
going to try
runs
and
that
step up.
Somerville Weekly Journal,
Yeah,
I
it's
read that he is in the mix. So,
right, but there are some characters who are kind of a
yeah.
little on the fringy side, and I
Yeah,
wouldn't
well,
necessarily name names.
you're pointing that out to me that,
Right,
yeah.
who basically have been just on Curtitone's case, whether for
Good or
good or
bad. Yeah.
bad or whatever. And uh, and I heard there's even were lawsuits and things flying here and there.
Mhm,
I don't pay a lot of attention to
mhm,
that stuff personally.
mhm.
The question is has he been a good mayor? In many ways, yeah, and I think probably in more ways than not, he's been a
Well,
good.
if he does run for some office, which is what's predicted, maybe governor, if any of that's true, it'll come out then.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he can, that's a bigger
So
state.
then, so what are we gonna, if we go that route, what do we have? We'll have like a primary battle between Maura Healey and Joe Curtatone
Oh,
for the
Maura Healey.
gubernatorial nomination
Maura
amongst
Healey would make a
Democrats.
good governor. She would.
Well, she's been running for it the entire time she's been
Yeah.
attorney general.
Well, but I had said that about Martha Coakley back in 2008. I was hoping she would wait. Instead, she ran for senator, which we know how that turned out, because I would have loved to have seen Michael Capiano be senator back then, frankly, but
Yeah,
that's me. Yeah,
no,
whatever.
no,
Can't
yeah.
cry over those things now, but
So anyway, so up in the Northlands,
yes,
across the border, the other
Northland.
side of Line Street,
Yeah,
yeah, they'll have some interesting
yeah, you're
politics
closer
this
to it
year.
than I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be interesting if Dennis Carlone's city council aide, who happens to be a city
Oh, yeah.
councilor
I
in
know. How many
Somerville,
people know
decided to
that?
run
Yeah,
for
right.
mayor?
Oh my
Then,
God. I think that'd
gee,
be a conflict of interest, right?
it's a
You get,
conflict of interest now,
wait,
honestly.
but wait, do you get paid more for mayor in Somerville than you do as a city council aide? Because that's gone up.
Probably.
Oh,
Yeah, I
wait,
would
that never
imagine
did go
so.
up. Did they ever approve that or not?
Some of it is being held back, I think,
Ah,
because
yeah,
of the
because it's going to
situation.
go up to some ungainly amount.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's a long-standing issue with
I
me is
know.
the
Me too.
appropriateness of even having city council aides, let alone
I
the
know, let alone
propriety of
someone
having
that,
an
an
elected official in a
alderman.
neighboring
I
town.
know. I don't know how that ever got passed, but
Yeah,
let's not even go there.
yeah. No, I sometimes there are some weeks I have some concerns that a significant amount of Cambridge public policy,
Oh,
or at
it's
least policy
Somerville policy. I
proposals,
know,
are
I
being
know.
drafted in Somerville.
Yeah, although Carlone got really down on, I guess it was Malin, he didn't name her for implying that we always take language from other cities or so. I don't know, I forget what it was, something. Few
Well,
contentious things these past
there
couple
are a
of
few
weeks.
things. Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so let's go.
Anyways,
All right, so that's Somerville. Okay.
yeah, so that's kind of a big deal here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Probably, I certainly would love to speak to some things that have happened at the city council meeting yesterday, but
yeah,
there are some meetings that have taken place very
that's right.
recently,
That
and
we
some
vote,
which are
right,
coming up,
right.
which are to me are a little bit on the, I would categorize them as table setting meetings,
Hmm.
meaning
Yeah,
this is a municipal election year.
yep,
And not to be too cynical, but the thing is oftentimes the content of some meetings is done maybe partly because it's what you want,
hmm,
and also because it's sort of good, juicy stuff for an election, for election
yeah,
campaigns too.
yeah, yeah.
So there are three in particular, I think, that are worth noting. One is they had an ordinance committee meeting on the 24th of February, I believe.
Hmm.
The topic there was campaign finance reform.
Which has been an ongoing thing for a while, right?
Well, the way I like to
Mhm.
think of it is every
Yeah.
2 years,
Oh, okay, it's true. It
it
comes up
becomes
more.
a
Yeah,
big political issue,
yeah.
and it's always introduced just in time so that they can never actually get past anything prior to the
To that
next
election
municipal
coming up.
election.
Yeah,
And
right,
then it gets forgotten for a little while, and then it
right.
comes back, and then rinse and repeat.
So have you seen the actual language? I mean, it's a policy, isn't it?
I have looked through it. I sometimes I kind of read things more for the
Yeah.
gist.
It
But
doesn't have,
basic
this doesn't talk about publicly finance. That's a separate issue, right?
That's a separate issue. But of course, whenever this issue of campaign
That always
finance
comes
comes
up.
up,
Yeah.
everybody says, you know what we really ought to be doing? And
No,
okay,
sorry,
fine,
I
fine,
am
fine.
not going to publicly finance any of, especially some of the people that try to run for council. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of inclined to agree with that. Yeah.
If people want to voluntarily put in a fund, like you do tax off your, do it, because I guess that's where it would come from, right? Like
I think if you look at some of the successful city council campaigns in recent years, like for example,
yeah,
Sumbul Siddiqui, Patty
she
Nolan,
does,
for
right.
example,
They
we're
don't
not
raise
talking
tons of
big
money,
dollars.
right?
So, and the thing is that it doesn't take a boatload of generous people to generate enough money to support a
Plus you have
campaign. So
social media now, which you didn't have, say, as much 10, 15 years ago. So you can do a lot of reach
yes,
out without spending a lot of money.
yeah, yeah.
All that printed stuff we get, please.
Right. So I think
About that, yeah,
so there were two proposals that were the subject of this particular, I guess it was an ordinance committee meeting.
right,
And one was, I believe, was originally from, well, I mean, it was introduced by Dennis Carlone, but the
okay,
language, as has been was very much discussed at the meeting,
Somerville,
was basically a Somerville ordinance on
yeah,
campaign finance. It puts a limit, basically a prohibition on campaign contributions by people who have, in some sense,
contracts or
yeah, some business
business
before the
before the
city.
city, yeah,
And I mean, I think if it'd be one thing if it was just saying like, okay, if you're basically seeking a contract with the city, you can't just slip a bunch of money to your favorite candidates, who might help you,
mhm,
get a contract or something. Though under the planning charter, we don't have a mayor, for example,
yeah,
in the same sense that they have in
right,
Somerville. So really, or anything relating to contracts is
uh-huh.
really done completely independent of the political people, at least in principle.
Well, that's true. It would be coming
Zoning
after the city
changes
manager.
is
Yeah,
is if you're seeking a zoning change for the purpose of doing something that you
right,
otherwise could not do, then that
right.
is the purview of the city
But
council.
that's a
And
good point. I never thought about it that way because it does, where most cities have a strong mayor, that's where you always hear about the backroom corruption, all that stuff, but
exactly, yeah.
less likely with our form of government.
Well, the other thing too is that back about 30 years ago, Massachusetts passed Chapter 30B,
Mhm.
the general laws having to do with municipal procurement. So the thing is that all cities, not city
Okay,
manager, strong mayor, everything, they have to kind of abide by certain
municipal
standards,
procurement, okay.
right? But that's primarily having to do with bidding,
Okay,
protocols and
right.
whatever. You could still, if somebody still has to make the decision, and they say, well, these two are sort of in the ballpark, but this
Mhm.
guy slipped me $2,000. I guess in a strong mayor system, money could count, money could talk there, right? Um, but I think what Councilor Carlone did, he also borrowed from some other place. Was it in New
New
Jersey
Jersey,
or
you mentioned it,
something,
yeah, I didn't look at,
or
yeah.
elsewhere? To basically include in the proposed limitations,
Mhm.
campaign contributions for anybody who's going to be seeking zoning
Zoning relief,
changes.
zoning,
And even that required some explanation, like that would lead to is, does that mean something that would increase the
enhancing
value
the
of their
value, right,
assets,
right,
enhancing value
right,
and
right,
whatever,
right, right, right.
which presumably is what would happen if you got zoning. But it does sort of raise an interesting question then, if somebody, depending on how far you want to take this, like, for example, if somebody says, well, my property values will be hurt if such and such a zoning proposal goes forward.
Yeah,
Um, so therefore, I'm going to give $1,000 to council whomever, or to several councilors here to
who
make
like,
sure they
who are
don't
into down,
change the zoning
right.
because it might affect that. So it's like, okay,
That's
so
right. That could be an individual doing that.
yeah, so I,
So
I think this is a
it's
pretty tricky question,
slippery slope.
honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And apparently the Somerville proposal was, I mean, that's a law. They passed, it's an existing
yeah,
ordinance. And there was a question, do you need to go to the state, under the home rule
right.
amendment for authorization to
To
do
do,
these kinds of
right.
restrictions?
And they didn't, right?
Well, the way I think it's pretty simple to say that in Somerville, their law department said that's not necessary. But in Cambridge, our law department is saying we think it is necessary.
But does the state ever look at this stuff anyway to say, oh, what's this city doing? And yes, you should have
They
done
don't,
that.
the
They don't
state will not just,
inter,
on a lark, just sort of, hey, I heard and I read in the paper that you're doing this. I think I have an
so
issue with
why
it.
couldn't we just do it without telling the state? I don't know.
That's what
I'm
Somerville
being,
did. That's what Somerville did.
so, and we, and our law department says, no,
Well,
we
I
have to
mean, the
go.
question is it's, I like to think of it as this fits into the category of no whistle, no foul.
Right,
So if nobody complains, if nobody files a
right.
legal challenge, you could have an ordinance carry on until such time as a court said, no, you can't do that, you know? So, and then basically, as long as nobody's complaining, I suppose you could do like they're doing in Somerville, is to
So
operate under.
Right, so
law.
I wonder then how much development has taken place in Somerville since then.
Um,
Because they're not complaining, that means things are going forward. I don't know.
the way I look at this is, yeah, I can point out, I'm not gonna single out anybody here, but I can point out some kind of pretty clear correlations I've seen in past years
Okay.
between very large contributions to some city councilors
Mhm.
and zoning changes that benefited
Mm.
certain interests.
Okay.
Not as nearly so much in recent years, maybe because there's so much of a hairy eyeball on it that it's
Yeah.
just something you sort of don't do.
Huh.
You'd also often see big contributions would show up in the campaign coffers immediately after the election. In
Mm.
other words, it would have been an issue if it had come
Right.
in before the election. So you basically
Mm.
promise, don't worry, you'll be getting your money. And then it shows up after an election takes place. I don't think this is nearly as big an issue as it
Mhm.
was in some past years.
Mm.
Some people try really hard to make it so. And it is certainly true that there is differences from some counselors, some candidates to other candidates in terms of the percentage of their campaign revenue that comes from certain types of sources.
But
Like,
no one's concerned about unions? I mean, not as, because there's not as
a
much
lot, well,
activity
actually,
there? I know
I
you
raise
list
the
that as a,
I
yeah,
raise the issue
yeah,
because to me the issue is not corruption so much as influence.
influence, yeah.
And if you have unions that can drop 500 here, 1,000 here, and they only do it to particular individuals,
Mhm.
and some of the union people are kind of politically connected,
Oh, yeah.
um, they can they can absolutely give an advantage to some candidates.
Mhm.
So and you could say the same thing about real estate. If I really wanted to go into this deeper, I could also sort of say, well, all right, how many people related to the up and coming cannabis industry are
Mm.
slipping $500 contributions to candidates who then vote favorably
Mm.
on certain changes to the
That's all
ordinance?
that's all public.
It's all
uh,
public record.
money.
The thing it makes it a little tricky is that sometimes you can't just tell. I mean, yes, you're supposed to put
Yeah,
I work for this company. So if you're,
but if it's
you
just a
know,
name, yeah, you don't always
if
know.
it's just a name, or if it's it happens to be the husband or wife of a
Yeah,
CEO
right,
of a certain firm, but it's not
right,
technically an employee. So
yeah,
the funds so you kind of have to know the players. And
yeah,
I have some knowledge of
right,
this,
yeah.
so there is some of this is a matter of interpretation. So
Hmm.
anyway, I think it's an issue. It's a real issue. Whether what's being proposed right now is the right solution, I really don't know. But I think sometimes it's kind of like as I was saying earlier, the introducing a proposal like this is itself a political act too. You
Mhm.
know,
Oh, yeah.
every municipal election year, like, well, let's make sure this is up on the front burner.
Yeah.
Campaign finance, and there can be all sorts of suggestions of corruption or wheeling
Mhm.
and dealing or pay to play happening. Whether it's real or not, it's a good issue. I
Yeah,
think some voters are very receptive to
yes.
that issue. So all right, so yeah, it's around again. And there was a second proposal too, by the way, which I can't. I was maybe it was McGovern who put it in, or maybe it was Toomey put it in. Just wanted to put a across the board cap of a $200 contribution limit from
Right,
all parties.
right.
And I think also there was a limitation proposed on how much you could loan your campaign.
Oh, was it $3,000 or?
Something, yeah. But
Yeah.
I can, listen, I don't work for the law department, but I can tell you
I think if it's your own money, you should be spending your own money.
some of these ideas,
No,
you
I
can
know.
float them, and people say, hey, isn't that wonderful? But they're just non-starters from a legal point of view.
Well,
And again,
I know why people object to that, because it's unfair to people just entering the race that aren't an incumbent, that don't have
yeah,
maybe
well,
that
that's
nice
that's
salary that goes along with being a city
yes.
councilor. I
So
don't
that's
know.
one of the arguments
Yeah,
that's made, and I think there's
yeah.
validity in the argument too.
And
But
then they say you should have public campaigns, but I don't think we should go there.
right, but the
Yeah.
thing is that regardless of the legal validity, I mean,
Mhm.
I should say, regardless of the validity about whether it would be,
Yeah,
tilting, tilting the table in favor of incumbents versus
Yeah,
challengers or whatever. I think it really just still comes down to a basic constitutional issue about speech,
yeah,
and people get very kind of upset when you say, well, money is speech. But the thing is
yeah,
that the Supreme Court has
yeah,
has been deciding that way,
yeah,
and whether you like it or not, I mean, if they say
yeah,
that's truth, then that's
yeah.
legally that's truth. And if somebody says, well, we're going to restrict how much money you can put in to basically make your own case,
Yeah,
that's
but
such an
and
infringement on
also
speech.
like we can think of some candidacies recently where they spent more money than anybody and didn't get on. So you can't
That's
say
right.
that just
Yeah,
spending money gets you a place.
exactly. So I mean, I think it's a worthwhile discussion, but I think in
Right.
some respects they're kind of chasing their own tail
I think the
on this.
voluntary cap, which you have talked about, we have talked about, is the best way to go. And anybody that goes above that, you just pointed out,
If
you know,
considering the fact that a much larger fraction of what political campaigns are about
yeah,
these days is social
yeah,
media, what
yeah,
this really means is that,
yeah,
then you're finding out about candidates, you're organizing
yeah,
around candidates, you're doing it, via social media. In other words, social media can cut both ways. You can, if somebody
yeah,
is basically just being bought and sold,
yeah.
smear it
That's
all
right.
over public,
Right.
in the public. And
Exactly. So, I mean, I mean, what figure would you, we've talked about this before. I think not more than, I was gonna say 15, but maybe 20. I think you said 25. I don't know.
the thing is that,
It's a lot of money for a lot of people.
right, but some people in the old days, people didn't pay campaign managers. Now they pay campaign managers.
Well, that's their problem.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No,
I don't know. Come up with the money yourself. I don't know. I
I
mean,
would
really.
I would prefer a world where, in
Yes.
fact, campaign people were basically friends and family and really pushing
Yeah.
it,
Right.
and then you give maybe a
Yep.
subsidy to some people to kind of help it
Right.
out. But
Right. 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 Right.
I think the sort of professionalization of these
I
campaigns is
know.
actually not my favorite trend.
You just go knock on doors, which is the old fashioned way. That doesn't cost any money. And
It's
it's your
hard to do that in
time, but
COVID, right? But
well,
yeah,
that's true. I don't,
hopefully that'll
well,
ease. But
I think at this point, they'll probably be able to do it.
I think we're kind of heading that way. By the way, and I know we've mentioned it before, but one of the factor, when in a municipal election
Yeah.
campaign, still unsettled, is the
Oh,
issue of how much of the protocols for the elections that we use during the presidential election year will be made available
oh,
during the
you mean the
municipal
early
election year.
voting type stuff?
For example, would there be early voting,
Oh,
or would there be
please.
no excuse absentee voting
Oh, well, that
for
should be.
municipal elections? And right now, that's not legal.
Really? No, you can't
No,
just, oh,
no. In fact, the only reason why uh, Cambridge, or not Cambridge, but Massachusetts even permitted the kind of essentially no excuse absentee voting, which is what
mm,
essentially
yeah.
and mail-in voting, was because of emergency protocols because of COVID. Those those
Oh,
technically expire, I believe, at the end of
really? I didn't know that.
March or April. So unless the state legislature passed a law that
Yeah.
basically allowed that to happen because of an emergency. Without that, it actually goes down to, it's
But no,
the
well,
state
the only thing I
constitution.
like that is the no excuse. I think people should be able to vote, during
Yeah,
get
but
an absentee ballot
right, but
without it.
as it stands right now,
Yeah.
there may have to be a state constitutional
Oh, that's
amendment,
too bad.
you know, you
All
know,
right.
unless they somehow manage to stay with the emergency
I
regulations,
I
right?
think they should start with that. Although I don't know how mail-in would work with a municipal, but I don't think you
Um,
need it. It's just,
Listen,
I don't
I
know.
think
I
they,
don't know.
last year was a
Yeah.
learning experience for election commissions
Oh,
and
about
boards
the
of
mail. Yeah.
registrar all across. So have
Right.
they, the question is who would fund it? I mean, so will be state funding involved in this, or
True.
must individual
Right.
municipalities foot their
Right.
own bill, which case
Mm.
wealthier communities will decide they should allow it because they can afford to do it, but
Well,
other
people would
communities will
argue
not.
that we could afford it.
Oh
Right.
yeah, we can afford everything. Oh, don't you know
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
Or as
Right.
former when he was mayor of Somerville, just to round out the circle here,
Yeah.
mayor of Somerville, Mike Capuano was famously once said, "Cambridge's got more money than God."
Wow.
Right? Because they were always our poor cousin to the north.
I
So,
wonder if early voting is more expensive than mail-in voting. I'd
probably
have,
yes.
you think so?
Well, I mean, it depends on how
You have to mail
how
it, you have to request
broadly
the
you do it.
ballot, mail it back, get it collected. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess there's some cost associated just with the mail
I'd say one or
protocols,
the other. I don't think you need both for a
right?
municipal election. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
so anyway, we'll see. I think the Secretary of State is on record supporting the idea, but again, you can't do it if it's not in sync with the state constitution. So
Well,
that's kind of
speaking,
where we
I mean,
stand right
I
now.
know we're closing the segment, but speaking of elections, some of the worst stuff is going on now in the country with, it's over 250 bills have been filed across the country in states to challenge, because they're all run by Republicans, these state legislatures, to really limit voting, and it's horrible. And
Yes.
the Supreme Court is hearing right now you should know this, section 2 of the voting rights thing, which is the last thing helping states, they might get rid of that. So we've got to pay attention to this stuff.
The voting
Yeah,
rights thing, I mean, that's a bigger discussion, but the thing is that,
absolutely.
some of the changes to the Voting Rights Act were that they call it pre-clearance. Certain states, if
Right,
they want to make changes,
right.
they have to
So they
basically get
got
it
rid of that
cleared.
part, right? They got that part because they said, well, it's not a problem anymore, but there's still this
Well, I
section
mean, I think it
2.
is a problem potentially with some states, but the question
Oh, it
is
is,
they,
but the Supreme Court didn't think it was anymore.
right. I mean,
Yeah,
the thing is that if you had, X number of states that were
yeah,
listed as bad actors in
right,
1965,
right.
you cannot presume that in 2021 they will,
Well, 2013 is when when they got rid of
right.
that. Okay,
So are they
yeah.
still bad actors is really the question, or have some new bad actors emerged in the
Yeah,
ensuing
well,
years?
I'd have to get the language of this section 2. I just heard about it. So I just think we've just got to keep our eye on this stuff.
I think it's
Really,
important to keep an eye
it's
on it,
really
and
awful.
and
Yeah.
there's some bad motives at
Oh,
play.
my God.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even nationally, there are some similarities though to,
Uh-huh.
the issue of, like, how is it legal to do some of the emergency things that were done this past year? In
Right.
my view, yes, but there's a valid question at least there about,
Well, they had
whether,
weekend voting in Georgia, which I think is
right.
great.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
think
we,
we're
all right,
just about
we're
out here
just
for
about, so we will see you in the next segment.
on
Continue.
Cambridge Inside Out.